I'm Dean Deal.
And I'm Steve Hoskins.
And you're listening to This Is the Good Life, a podcast devoted to deciphering what it means to live as a Christian in this day and age.
And not just a Christian, but as philosophers, theologians, and maybe even decent golfers.
And a marketing guy.
Yeah, used to be a marketing guy.
Yeah, so speak for yourself. As two longtime college professors, we share a common goal to bring virtue and character back into the conversation of what it means to be Christian.
We'll do this by unpacking the thoughts of both our current culture and prominent philosophers like Aristotle, Kant, Descartes, and a guy called Jesus Christ.
You'll find that some pretty old thinkers had some pretty good ideas.
So join us for a conversation worth having about a life worth living.
After all, this is the good life. Well, hey, Steve.
Hey, Dean.
We're talking about practices.
Yeah, practices are fascinating. They're the hardest part of MacIntyre to understand because practices come between the virtue defined, okay?
Yes.
And then the excellences.
Yes.
The interior and the exterior. Practices, he doesn't say they're proof of exterior excellences, but what virtues are after are about the excellences of life. The excellences of being able to love the right things rightly, to use them to order your world rightly. And everybody sort of dances around the definitions. You know, we're not sure if it's giving or thrift or charity or generosity, and you get different. But in that is practices, because practices make very real. Almost to the point of being able to make good judgments, how things are going. But in order for all of that to make sense, then you have to move from the definition to the practice to the narrative unity of one's life, the context in which one lives, the different contexts, the different histories that coincide in anyone's life. You know, the history of our families. My family's from South Carolina. Your family's not. I'm sorry about that for you.
You made it within 2 minutes.
I was trying to do my best.
You know what's going to be interesting with the video aspect of what we're doing
right
now?
We're videoing this.
Yeah, so every time you look at the clock.
Okay.
But our more astute observers will be able to tell what episodes we did at the same time because our clothes,
they match.
Now, I only have 5 outfits, so it could just happen anyway that I would wear the same
but not
thing.
me.
And in fact, I call them outfits, proves I have daughters.
Yeah, but then you have to have this and it's almost an invisible narrative unity of your life.
That's right.
You know, it is what is evidenced by the life that you're living. And then that has to be connected to a moral tradition.
That's right.
And so for us, it's the Christian faith. But in those intersected narratives that unify us as a person and us together as friends is the Church of the Nazarene, is Trevecca, is growing up in the South, is being made to take music lessons. It's fascinating. And practices are more than the thing.
And that's
really important because MacIntyre says making bricks, unfortunately for Stanley Hauerwas and his dad, Coffee.
Yes.
Stanley Hauerwas' dad's name, Coffee. I can't tell you how much money I would get. Decaf. Yeah. I mean, there's so many great, latte. Yeah. But it's not making bricks. It's architecture that's the practice.
That's right.
It's not tic-tac-toe. It's chess.
That's right.
And so practices aren't activities.
Right.
They're the way in which the virtue is expressed.
You enter into the virtue through the practice. And the context that you talked about, particularly the moral narrative, is so important because we're going to talk about giving. And when we say giving, the moral narrative that you have determines what that means. And what MacIntyre does so well is he differentiates between excellence on one side and effectiveness on the other side.
Well, some people call this the right MacIntyreans and the left MacIntyreans.
See, and so the classic argument that they had back in the day, way back in the Greek stuff, what makes a good warrior? Is the good warrior the warrior that has the virtues of the warrior of courage and faithfulness?
Doesn't flinch in battle.
And so, or is the warrior whoever wins?
Right.
And the definition of it, what you put 2 warriors, may the best warrior win. No, the one that wins is the best. So the best warrior in the world could go up against a rabbit, trip on some rabbit poo, fall on his sword, impale himself, and the rabbit would be the
greatest warrior.
The greatest warrior.
Yeah.
So I'm a little
this
biased.
Sounds like a really bad cable TV show. Does it sound that way? Is this a marketing thing that you're trying to get me to give you money for?
This is I've got a point that I'm trying to get to with the excellence versus effectiveness.
Yeah.
When we talk about giving, with effectiveness, my job is to feed the poor. And so if I'm going to feed the poor, I have to know that I was effective at doing that. So I have to, first of all, define the poor.
Yeah.
I have to find the poor.
Quantify
I have to then feed the poor.
Quantify
and then I have to see, yes. And then I have to make sure that I fed a lot of poor.
Yeah.
Because then I was really effective and I receive whatever it is I wanted to get out of feeding the poor. That's how effective. The goods of excellence, the people pursuing excellence, you never feed the poor. There's no category of the poor. There's only our neighbor.
Right.
And there is a massive difference between, what are you doing? I'm feeding the poor. What are you doing? I'm giving my neighbor some food.
Yeah.
And the difference between the two is the difference between a life of excellence and a life of effectiveness. Yeah. And I'd love to say that in the church, well, it's obvious, no-brainer, we would pursue excellence over effectiveness. But that's not true, because effectiveness is so part of the U.S. culture.
Yeah, well, it's part of capitalism.
Well, and
the idea of amassing wealth. Well, it's got to be quantifiable.
And McIntyre says it's even more deeply embedded than that, because in order for you to pursue excellence, there has to be a standard of excellence that comes from outside of you, either from God or a tradition with a history and clearly defined practices that produce a definition of this is what good is, this is what beauty is. And in a diverse, pluralistic culture like ours, where the very definition of pluralism says we don't share gods or traditions, we cannot have a shared standard of excellence. So effectiveness is when you can't agree on the higher orders, then you organize yourself against a lower order. Instead of first order principles, so we end up with
efficiency, and then it becomes easy to tell who the virtuous person is.
Yeah, the person that fed the most poor.
The person that fed the most poor, or the person who had the most to give away. And whether they gave it away or not. And we end up positing virtue in places, honestly, that you can't.
And then Jesus sits at I see him sitting there just watching people at the temple giving money.
Yeah.
And you hear they threw their money into that big brass trumpet thing so it'd make a bunch of noise. Yeah. And all of a sudden you hear this little tinkle, tinkle, tinkle as this little old lady, you like my tinkle, tinkle? I should go into sound effects. I could be a Foley artist who only makes sounds. Anyway,
I'm thinking about really bad Bugs Bunny cartoons right now.
Exactly right. I used to make movies with my kids, and I had a whole library of Bugs Bunny sound effects.
How did I know this without knowing it?
But you hear the little tinkle, tinkle of the lady dropping her 2 tiny coins, and he goes, she just gave more than everybody else. That is not goods of effectiveness language. No, and if we're going to give well, then giving can't be thought of as giving.
Yeah. Well, in
that, you know what I mean?
Oh, no. Yeah, I mean, it's giving, but it's not just connected to other virtues. It's an expression of the greatness of virtue.
Yes, that's a good one.
So Paul says in 1 Corinthians, he says, I could give all my money to the poor, and I could give my body over to be burned. But if I do not love,
that's right.
If I do not have love,
that's right.
I'm nothing.
That's exactly right. And you can feed hungry people without loving them.
That's right.
But you can't feed a neighbor without loving them.
No, you really can't.
Or even think of it as charity.
Yeah.
It's not, it's my neighbor. If your neighbor comes over.
And it's the sharing of abundance.
That's right.
So I grew up amongst really poor people, Nazarenes in South Carolina. If I mention this, that I'm from South Carolina.
I think that has come up.
But anyway, we were particularly poor.
Do you know where I'm from?
No, I have. Well, I know you're not from South Carolina. That's the only thing that really matters.
Egg Harbor, New Jersey.
No, you're not.
I was born there, and they moved very quickly.
You were not born in a place called Egg Harbor.
Egg Harbor, New Jersey. You can smell it.
Yeah,
if you
try.
You can. You can smell it.
My goodness. I'm
guessing there was a high concentration of sulfur water.
Yeah, I'm thinking something bad. Anyway, in South Carolina, I mean, poor. I mean, I was born into a single-wide trailer in a single-wide trailer park full of single-wide Nazarenes. And that's just true. That's just true.
And were they really single wives?
They really were, and considering the size of Nazarenes, but we'll leave that go, and me. But anyway, so part of my life growing up was the place of pilgrimage. And I think pilgrimage is that great practice of belonging, yes. And so we made the pilgrimage every year to the South Carolina District Camp Meeting. I grew up in the sand of that camp meeting with friends that I speak to almost on a daily basis to this day. And while we were there, while I was a teenager, my uncle became the camp manager. And they decided to start a church. And on Sunday after church, the lady that cooked for the camp made a huge meal. Well, somehow the smell and the word, and there were people living down sand roads with no electricity, no running water. I mean, extreme poverty. People we went and literally brought to church as we started this church. Well, they heard there was food down the hill. I never saw anybody turned away.
Yeah.
I never saw anybody. Remember, this is South Carolina. Yeah. This is the 70s. It didn't matter the color of your skin.
Right.
It didn't matter how old you were. It didn't matter what your place in society was.
That's not feeding the poor.
No.
That is caring for your
That is
neighbor.
sharing God's abundance.
That's exactly
And God's abundance, was wonderful food. It was rice. It was ham and grease. But there was a joy there.
So you're saying it wasn't exactly a healthful experience.
No, it certainly was not that. But I'm still here.
Yeah.
But there is in that giving something greater than the activity of saying, "Here, have a plate."
That's right.
There is something there of saying, "Welcome to a tradition, a moral tradition called Christ's Holy Church," and you have a place at the table. You're welcome here as a friend, and you're welcome here as someone for whom Jesus Christ gave his life. And you're welcome to come here and feast with us on his goodness, and to enjoy life.
And the word you've used that I love so much is abundance.
Oh, yeah.
The abundance mentality versus a scarcity mentality. Yeah. The opposite of giving and the opposite of generosity is the scarcity mentality. And I don't want to sound like an economist for a moment, because I'm not an economist, but I know one.
Right.
And I've read his books.
Yeah, oh, really?
And I
thought you were going to say you played one for a marketing firm once upon a time.
I did. I do work in a business school and teach entrepreneurship.
Imagine that.
And economics, the value comes from scarcity. In order for there to be value, for example, I can't sell you air. Air is abundant.
Yeah.
Being generous with air is easy.
Although you can put it in a canister.
You can compress that air and sell it for a bunch.
Yes, you can.
And in Japan, they have oxygen bars. Where you go and they have so much smog, and you go breathe some oxygen.
Really?
Yeah. And
how
interesting.
Choose
your oxygen, and you can breathe your oxygen.
Does that tell you how limited my experience of the world is?
No.
Okay.
The fact that you talk about nothing but South Carolina tells me how limited your experience
of the world is.
Yeah, it was
so great.
Clear way before that. But the idea of a scarcity mentality, that if for you to have something means I no longer have it. In an abundance mentality, you're never actually giving anything.
Yeah.
You're sharing.
You're sharing.
That when I give, I'm not less.
Right.
I haven't lost anything. Like if I say, "Hey, Steve, you want some air? Take all you want."
Yeah.
Let me just say, but what if everything? What if everything is as abundant as air? And that's why all of these, what makes these virtues Christian virtues rather than Greek virtues, is faith, hope, and love.
Love and obedience.
That's right. But the faith, hope, and love powers all of it.
And joy. But faith, hope, and love are the Christian virtues. But it's obedience and joy.
Yes.
It's that willingness. I was reading the other day, Benjamin Franklin, of all people, decided when he was 21 years old. Poor Richard, yeah. And we all know the stories about Franklin's life.
Yes.
But at 21, he decided he wanted to be a virtuous person. So he made a list of virtues.
Because he tried everything
else. He tried everything else, apparently. Anyway, but he made this list of virtues. And in the list of virtues is thrift. And beside it, he would have this, being Benjamin Franklin, this catchy little thing. And it said, essentially, using your money for your good or the good of your neighbor. And I thought, yeah, that's it. That's the simplicity aspect of it, and the faith that it's not even just that there'll be more tomorrow. Yeah. The faith that God will take care of us.
That's right.
And believing that.
Right.
And hoping that.
And we have to believe that as a community. We have to believe that as a church.
Yeah.
To have the faith, hope, and love that I can live in abundance.
Yeah.
Even when I look around and the pantry's getting empty and which hadn't happened at my house in a long time,
no.
but there was a time.
Yeah.
But to be able to live in abundance,
PhD
even
school.
when you don't see the abundance, but to live in that abundance requires a community committed to live life together.
It's that invisible narrative unity.
That's right.
Maybe not even just invisible. Maybe it's the narrative unity of being a part of a church that does better for people than say, let's invest in the foreign people. Yeah. Or let's give because the Bible says we have to give 10%. Yeah. Well, I read the Bible, and the Bible says God is a God of abundance. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, and He wants everything you've got.
That's funny.
He wants it all.
He does. I had one of my girls, I'm not going to say which one.
Okay.
One of my girls gave me a gift.
Rhymes with?
One of my girls gave me a gift, and it was so sweet. And I opened up the gift. I thought, this is so sweet. Where did you even get the money from this? Yeah. Oh, I took it out of your wallet.
Wait. This isn't true.
No, this is true.
This is really true?
Yeah.
She went to your wallet.
She went to the wallet.
She says to herself, I want to do something nice for Dad.
For Dad. But I don't have any money.
Wallet?
Let me get his money. I'm going to buy something for him with his own currency. When we are generous, when we give,
yes,
we're paying God back in His own currency.
Yeah.
Every time. Did you ever read Siddhartha by Herman Hesse?
No.
Siddhartha is loosely, it's kind of like his allegory of the Buddha.
Of the Buddha, sure.
He goes, there's a river. On one side of the river are the rich people.
Okay.
And the people that live in total decadence, and on the other side of the river are the people that are poor and live in austerity, and I'm butchering the story. If you know the story well,
sure.
This is the gist.
Right.
And he goes and he tries living the rich life, and he goes and he tries living the poor life, and he ends up deciding to live by the river.
Oh, wow.
And as people pass by to say, there is no rich, there is no poor, there's only the river.
Wow.
And it's such a beautiful story, but that's where we live. We go, you think you're rich.
Yeah.
You're not rich.
No.
You think you're poor. You're not poor. Yeah. There's only Jesus.
Yeah.
And His kingdom.
And you get to live by the river.
And you live by the river of His presence. The only way for us to be rich or poor is to look at each other. And so we've got our ladders, and we can look up the ladder and feel like envy. Oh, they've got more than me. We can look down the ladder and go, oh, they've got less than me. And we're always looking up and down the ladder, and Jesus isn't on the ladder.
Yeah.
He's in a completely different story.
Yeah. And it is in the narrative unity of the story of Jesus that binds all of our stories together, that you see the great fullness, the completeness of God's giving.
Yes.
His love has no limit. His grace has no measure. His power got no, we can't get there.
No.
But out of His infinite riches in Jesus, He giveth, and He giveth, and He giveth again. And there is in that our salvation. And that's living the good life.
This is The Good Life is produced by Nathaniel Jackson and is a ministry of Hermitage Church of the Nazarene. Visit hermitagechurch.org for more information about this podcast, as well as our other podcasts, all of which are a way that we're making Christ-like disciples in the nations. Thanks for joining us, and have a blessed day.